So I have a question before you ask me anything.
Yeah, go
Okay.
for it.
How are you guys? How did you guys happen to watch Bells of Bleecker Street?
So we have a guy we know. Well, we found this guy online who basically is a collection of TV shows that were taken off of VHS tapes decades ago. And he had Bells of Bleecker Street, and now we have Bells of Bleecker Street, and we watch Bells of Bleecker Street.
Do you know?
And if you don't have a copy, I'm happy to share it with you. So
Oh, that's so cool. So cool.
Do you know? Do you know why we watched it?
No.
So
That's what I
yeah, so this podcast that we're doing, we started it almost a year ago now. Like we're almost to the 50 set. What are we at? Like 90?
no, 2 years. 2 years ago.
Oh, I can't even keep. COVID year just kind of didn't happen, kind of. But yeah,
It happened.
2 years ago we decided to start this podcast where the whole idea is we go and we watch every single episode of TGIF. Whatever happened to air that night is what we watched, and we've been doing it for 98 weeks or something like that.
Almost 2 years. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and
Bells of Bleecker Street had its 30th anniversary 3 weeks
Yeah.
ago.
so it was exactly 30 years after that aired originally. We watched it, and then we found you, and you were gracious enough to come on the show with us.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I think the whole concept of your podcast is fantastic.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Because people think that all like the up and coming, what's new. There are a lot of great shows and so many things to keep up with, but there have been some real jewels, created all the way from the black and white era to now and throughout. And it's nice that somebody's paying attention to that. So thanks.
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun.
So with this show, I mean, obviously 30 years ago, I don't know how much you remember, but was this like your first kind of dig into acting? Like I didn't see a whole lot before this. Were you doing things in like school and stuff, or how did you actually get this role?
Oh man, oh man. All right. So at the time, I was 15.
Uh-huh.
I was a freshman. I was a freshman, or no, I was a sophomore, just starting as a sophomore at the LaGuardia High School for Performing Arts,
Okay.
where it's in New York. And I had my firstborn son a few weeks prior to the casting.
Oh wow.
So I was a teen mom. At 15, I had my first son, Elijah. And one of my teachers, who's a fairly renowned actor, James Moody, in my theater department, had told me about this audition. We were doing school performances, and I had been contacted by an agent who's still my friend and dear agent, Cynthia Katz. She was with one agency at the time, and now she's with Creative Artists. And she came to see me in a show and reached out to me amongst a few other folks. And she was just so friendly and nice. I knew nothing about the acting world outside of school. I had performed, I was a dancer. I was a ballet dancer for, most of my childhood. And I just loved dancing. And so she came to see me, and then I got all like this flurry of calls from agents. And my parents were, they're immigrants. They didn't understand anything about this at all. So they would just say, no, you talk to them. Just what is it that they want? And so Cynthia was so friendly that out of the folks who contacted me, I agreed to go and see her with my mom. And then she says, oh, we have this audition. We think you'd be really great for it. Would you go? It was literally, I had met her like within 3 weeks of the casting. And she sent me out. I met Eve Branstein, who was one of the co-writers and co-producers of the show, who later became my manager after Bells for a short time. And I went and they booked me, and it was my first anything. It was amazing. It was the best experience, the best script. The people were amazing. I felt really blessed.
Yeah, like as a 15-year-old girl, like the idea of filming this pilot and like not knowing where it was going to go. I mean, that had to have been like, I can't even think of like what it would feel like being, like you said, a freshman in high school.
And on top of that, because I was also a single mom,
Yeah.
at the time, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and really working hard mentally, emotionally, spiritually to not give in to the stereotypes. And so I didn't want to drop out of school because
Yeah.
going to LaGuardia was my dream. I did know that I wanted to be a performer. It was between, like, I always wanted to do that and then get a PhD because I'm also a writer. And so I was like, how am I going to do this? I have a child and I was managing school and looking for part-time work and all of that. And then I got the pilot, and they paid me $15,000, and I took that money and I got an apartment and I paid my rent for a year.
Wow.
It was amazing.
That's incredible. Were you, I mean, at that age, you were kind of the market for what TGIF was doing and kind of what that show was aimed to. Did you have any kind of idea that it was going to be even included on TGIF, or or what you were kind of getting yourself into as far as what that meant?
Not at all. Not at all. I really didn't. I just, the concept of flying to another state to perform, to act, because I was a student. I remember Eve was amazing. She let me stay at her home. Cynthia went out with me and stayed there for 2 weeks or so because my parents couldn't not go to work. And I was a minor and we didn't have anybody to go with me. So they were just awesome. And so I went there. I had a tutor on set. Everybody was awesome. I met some of the Baldwin brothers,
Right.
which was awesome. And
Now you say plural. Did Steven show up with one of the other ones, or was it just?
Well, there were two of them who showed up, and then later on they were friends with some of the producers and even stuff.
Okay.
So whenever they got together in New York, sometimes I'd get invited. So it's really,
Oh wow,
just an amazing experience.
that's incredible. Did you get to watch it on TV when it aired? Did you know that it was coming on and get a chance to actually sit down and watch it on
I
TV?
didn't get to see it on TV. I got to see it at a private screening, and it was so surreal.
So I've got a question about 1991, because Travis and I were unsure about this when we watched the episode. Did girls really like Stephen Baldwin in 1991?
Well,
like, was he a teen heartthrob back then?
So here's the interesting thing, right? Now that we're in the era of,
no easy answer for that.
no, right. And this is why it's not an easy answer. I would say on one end, absolutely, like Melissa Clayton, my co-star in the show, and some of her friends and sisters, like they knew who he was, and they were all into him. I did not know who he was, unfortunately, but it was because I coming from a Latino home, even though I grew up in a Jewish family in Washington Heights, Jewish neighborhood in Washington Heights, that was just starting to get more desegregated because my dad was a super. So the whole script was so parallel to my life, except the fact that I had a baby, right? I was a 15-year-old.
That was episode 4 or 5. It just never happened, right?
It didn't. They don't know what they missed out on, but because it turned out to be such a great, my life turned out pretty great with my son and my family. But so I didn't know about the Baldwin brothers. And so that didn't just open up a world of acting and professional acting to me, but it like opened my eyes to the fact that there were all of these different like pop cultures and subcultures going on at the same time with other girls my age from different cultures, and that we all had like our different idols and icons, even though I loved like Billy Idol and John Bon Jovi. I grew up with that. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, like you're saying, like the parallels. I mean, that's just like the story of the show. I mean, Lindsay and JoJo, two different girls, like kind of coming together, having different likes, and then becoming friends. I mean, it sounds like that's exactly what you were going through.
It was, and I thought that Ann Beats and Eve Branstein's, the producers and co-writers, I feel like they were just visionaries who could see things way ahead of their time or whatever was happening at the time.
It really does lay the groundwork for a lot of the shows that we see like in the future on TGIF, that kind of buddy relationship you see in Sean and Corey and Boy Meets World, and then kind of the same thing in Sister Sister. But yeah, I mean, it definitely was the kind of TGIF show that became super popular later on in its run. So
and they really they were culturally sensitive in ways that they didn't even realize they were being at the time. From everything from the characters like my mom and my dad, and Lindsay's parents, and how they interacted, and it was just it was really on point, and it's a shame. I always thought, in retrospect, that it didn't get picked up, but looking at everything that's been happening in our world in the past decade, and more recently, sometimes the artists are way ahead of their times, and art reflects, either where we are, where we're going, or where we should be going sometimes.
Do you remember, like, as a 15-year-old girl, what it was like the anticipation of, like, is this show going to happen? Like, were you thinking, like, oh man, I'm going to be a superstar. Like, this is going to be the biggest thing. I'm going to do multiple seasons of the show. And then, like, the letdown, like, was that there, or what were you thinking?
Yes and no. So I love people. I love performing, but I am a natural introvert. Some people don't believe that, unless, like, I can do the one-on-one or small groups. Me in big crowds, it's like, and I love theater because the lights are so strong, you can't see who's in front of you, so that it wouldn't make me so nervous. But on the sets, Eve and Cynthia, from the very beginning, and that was one of the things I've always loved about Cynthia, is that she would tell me from the get, she would say, these are the possibilities.
Okay.
I want you to be excited, but I don't want you to get your hopes so high, because this is what can happen in the business. And they would lay it all out for me. So because that was my first experience, I didn't have anything longer to compare it to.
Yeah.
I wanted it to continue, obviously, because wow, that would have solved so many, challenges that I was facing at the time, and so many questions. But I was also like, okay, well, if I do this, I was thinking about how am I going to finish, school in like my dream school, and how am I going to manage that with taking care of my baby. And while I saw all the financial opportunities that it would offer and the stability, I was happy about that. But those were some real, some questions that I had, because while I was in California filming this and in the post, there were a lot of events that I had to attend. And they were all celebratory in nature, and people getting to know me and all of that. Cynthia and Eve were great with setting those things up for me, but it was shell shock for me. So it was like, oh, wow, this is what my everyday is going to be. And then people would start, like, when I would go into studios, I'm like, how does this even happen? Like, people would start coming to the limousines at that time and pounding on the windows. And then I started getting like fans, and I was like, how is this even possible? Like, I just did a pilot, like, what's going on? so I never was into it for the fame, I should say. That's not why I got into acting. So, I wasn't too disappointed that it didn't go through for that reason. I just thought it was a great story, and that more people should know about different families and diverse families and neighborhoods.
Absolutely. Well, good, Steve.
No, you're good.
I was saying it wasn't the only thing you've done. You've got, I'm looking at IMDb, so that's all I got to go on. But you did a few other things in the 90s, and then and it looks like you had a production credit too for a short that you did maybe 10 years or so ago.
Yeah. So
what were those projects like?
So right after Bells, or shortly after, within, I would say 6 months, I was booked as a like an ongoing character on the soap opera As the World Turns.
Oh, okay.
So I did that for about a year, and that was really nice, playing this character called Inez Torice. And eventually, when I was written off, it was because I had decided, my character in the soap had decided to go back to her native country to open up, to study to be a doctor and to help orphans, which is so like me. that would be something I would totally want to do. So I did that. I did some music videos like David Bowie video with my son. So that was really awesome.
That's cool.
I did Sesame Street, Law and Order. Like I did all of these different projects, and I loved it. I did a little bit of theater, and then I did an independent movie called Lotto Land, and I was 19 at that point. Um, but I was at that point I was a student at NYU, so I graduated at the top of my class from LaGuardia with the scholarships, and I went to NYU for theater. And at the time, they had us taking 17 credits per semester, including production. So normally
Wow.
people will take 12 to 15. We had
Right.
17. And they were not very flexible with like missing classes or
Yeah.
anything. They're like, if you're going to do school, you're going to do school. If you're going to work, you're going to work. And in my circumstance, I had to do both. So I stayed there for almost 2 years. And I kept saying, they would keep calling me. All these different folks were calling me with job auditions and offerings. And I had to a lot of times say no. And then Cynthia was like, okay, Barb, we got to talk. Because, she was like, I get it. Education is really important to you. And it was, because I was going to be the first person in my family to graduate from college. I'm a first generation American born. So that was really important to me. And she said, Barb, we got to talk because I have all these casting directors and all these people calling, and you're doing a great job. But, we can only say no so many times. I'm getting, they're chewing my head off over here. She's like, why don't you think about, if you want to do this, or do you want to take a year or two off to finish school? So then you can just focus on this like full time. And I thought about it. She goes, because you've been working so hard, and I know school's important, but if you want to work, there's a lot of work being offered, and you can't keep saying no, because then they're not going to call you anymore at some point. So I decided that I wanted to finish school. And then I moved to Florida temporarily. I went to FAU to finish out there. Because even while I was here, I was still getting calls. So I also had an agent for voice talent. So I did some voice work and commercial work. So I was just like, I need a break. It was really overwhelming, but so that's what I did. I went, finished school, then I moved back to the city and pursued, different work opportunities.
I've got a Bell's specific question for you. I hope there's a story behind this. There might not be, but explain tips to me.
Oh, so Melissa and I made it our own. Eve and Anne, the co-writers, they said, "Well, just do something, like create your own thing."
Yeah.
That would be a besties kind of thing. And so we were on the show, we were practicing doing different things backstage of like, what would we do with our friends if we got really excited? So what she would do and what I would do were actually kind of different things.
Uh-huh.
And so one day we were like, okay, we're going to be great. And we were like, hey, that could be our thing. That could be our tips. And then we did it.
Steve loves the tips.
I love
Steve
the tips.
is all about the tips.
Like I can tell you all 3 times it happened in the episode, but I was just hoping that there was like a tip shirt or something made eventually that I could just. It's the two of you. It just says tips across the top, but I guess it never got made.
People might misread that though, Steven.
Oh yeah, that's probably a good idea. Maybe put the words down at the bottom or something like that.
I think it's on you to make that shirt now, Steve. I think that is your responsibility. Okay. I don't think you're going to have any issues with people with copyright. So I say go for it.
All right, I'm going to wear it to the live show. That's what I'll do.
To the live show. There you go. So what's going on now? Do you still see acting? Are you still doing acting now, or is it kind of something that isn't in the past?
So I definitely see it as part of my future. Awesome. Since that time, I got married. I have 3 boys. So my firstborn is going to be 33 now in August. My middle son is 19, and my youngest is about to turn 8. Awesome. So aside from education, I always felt, and I continue to feel like my number one calling in life was to be a mom.
Yeah.
Because I love children, and I love, my favorite thing in the world is being a mom. And with my first two, I did work in the acting, and I was traveling while I was working other jobs. I was working like 7 days a week, trying to hold on to my craft, my passion for my craft, while still making a living to support my kid, my child. Um, and I became an executive director of an international business organization at some point. And then I also worked for an international research firm because I do speak Spanish, fluent Spanish and English, and conversational French. I used to speak it a lot more when I was younger, because it interested me as part of the work that I was doing. And then I started writing more for like the newspapers and television shows, and people would through NBC, they were exploring how to diversify their um, their programming in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And some opportunities came my way, and I became a business partner of a small production company out of Soho called Glazin Creative at the time, with my former business partner, Alan Glazin. He's based out of Ohio, and he's in New York as well. And so he brought me on. I was the youngest person, obviously, and we decided to create a series of a docu-series on different ethnic groups in New York City. And it was picked up by PBS and WNET. And so I did that for a bunch of years. And I just wanted to dedicate my time to helping the general public learn about, learn how to appreciate and value diversity, and to dissolve like a lot of the negative stereotypes that exist in the world. So I was so excited about that work as a writer, because I did see how for Latinos and in general, people of color and minorities, there were, and I feel not as much now, even though it's still an issue, but there were very limited roles that were either, starring roles or roles of substance. And that was one of the things that when Cynthia would send me information about a lot of the auditions, I saw that most of them were very stereotypical. And her and I had a lot of conversations about that. And she completely understood and was on my side. And she's like, well, unless you get older and you start writing them or doing something, she's like, this is what's coming, this is what comes down the pipeline. And so a lot of them I would say no to anyway, because I always felt that I wanted to take on roles that either were dear to my heart or whose stories I truly believed in. And most of all, that were things that my son at the time could look back on, when he was grown up, and feel proud.
Yeah. You might have.
So I wouldn't take a lot of those like stereotypical things, because I was like, oh, how would I explain this to my son when he's older, or my family? I'm like, no.
You might have said this and I might have missed it. The docu-series that you did for PBS, is that something that's already out, or something that came out or is coming out?
Yeah, no, that came out in the early 2000s.
Okay.
It was called the American Spirit. And then so we did Dominican American Spirit, New Yorkers in New York. We did Desi, South Asians in New York. We did the other islands of New York. So it was like a whole series, and they were very well received. And I think that they spurred a lot of the work and opened doors for some of the programming that has come out.
Started some conversations for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool.
So That's I've awesome. Had my production, and then after that, I opened up my own production company called G2M Productions. First it was G2M LLC, then it was G2M Productions Inc. And so I've had it now since for 20 years. And but I've done some things over the years, but then I went back to school and got 2 masters, and I've just been kind of picking and choosing where and what, and helped write programming and commercials, and have done a lot of trainings for diversity with different companies like Accenture over the last 10 years, done a lot of their copy work, and just creating stuff to help educate the world.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome.
That's incredible.
I'm glad to find out that you're doing something that you really enjoy doing, and you're doing something
Yeah.
that you feel is making a difference, like everywhere.
That's
That's the big
my
thing,
goal.
right? That's what you want.
Yeah. That's my goal in life. Yeah, but I've missed acting so much. For a while, I did. I would do voiceovers or little, info commercials or different things. Try to work that around the schedule just to like never lose that flame. It just got harder and harder.
Yeah.
A few years ago, then I became. I got I got a master's in special education, and then I went back and got another master's from the City College of New York in educational urban leadership. And then I became an assistant principal, so a school administrator. And I've kind of just been juggling that for the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, that's an incredible, when we found you, all we had to kind of go on was your IMDb page. And I feel like your IMDb page is a drop in the bucket of like the amazing career that you've had over the last 30 years. And that's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thanks, Travis.
Yeah. Barbara, I mean, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. It's really, I mean, it's great. It's awesome going back, finding these shows, watching them 30 years later, but then actually getting to talk to people and find out that there's so much more to them than there was that we know about from that show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think recently I saw on television that they were showing like a special or something about the movie of Selena, for example, right? When we go back talking about so many years, and with JLo being on the news so much lately, it reminded me that when I moved to Florida to finish school, my BA, the first time around, I actually was called for and auditioned for the role of Selena.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And it was funny because I heard that it came down to like these other two actresses from New York. And at the time I was from Florida. So they said, oh, and this person from Florida, they didn't know that I was originally from New York.
Yeah.
and my mom over the years, she's always been like, oh, that could have been you. And I'm like, no, mom. Back then and until recently, I never had the JLo butt. So she was perfect for the Selena role. She did an amazing job. Like let her, that was her thing. She's done great. And then, with In the Heights coming out most recently on TV, where I had my second office in Manhattan in Washington Heights. I used to be down at Crosby Street, and I intentionally moved it up to the Heights because I said, I want whatever work and whatever's coming out to come out from the neighborhood where I'm from.
Yeah.
And Washington Heights used to have like a not good reputation for some time. And there was so much more going on there than what people knew, good things. And so I came uptown and I happened to know Lin-Manuel's dad. So we shared office spaces for not shared it. We were next to each other. And so then when I left that building, I gave him the office. And then I heard all about this In the Heights. And they're like, are you going to audition? And I was like, no, not this time around. Not this time. I was in the middle of some documentaries that I was working on. And I was like, no, let's leave it for all the, up and coming younger artists. And then when I saw it on its premiere night, it was so funny. There are some scenes, especially with the young lady, the beautiful girl, who it looks like we could be sisters.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where she comes home from college and she's walking down the block and they're showing like her neighborhood and I was like, hey, whoever filmed that scene saw the scene that I did in Modelland because it's the same exact concept. But it was beautiful in my indie movie I was in, and it was beautiful in the Heights. And I was like, hey, so I can see in some weird, wonderful kind of way that the work that I've done throughout, my life, that it's been watched by different people, and I can see how it's continued to kind of make a difference. And
That's
that
awesome.
makes, my heart pretty happy all the time.
Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
Barbara, we'll let the kids get back to the video games so you can hand your computer back over.
Should we, before we let you go though, should we do a virtual tips?
Oh,
All
yeah,
of us
of course.
tip
Okay,
one of these
ready?
numbers. What
One,
tips?
2, 3 tips.
There we go. Tips.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good one. Thank you.